Hi everyone and welcome back. Today we're talking about every parent's worst nightmare. A little girl who was put to bed, only to be taken in the middle of the night right out of her own bedroom and killed. A case that would later become one of Utah's most chilling unsolved murders. This is the story of Rosie Tapia, and today marks 27 years of her killer walking amongst us. A family member of Rosie reached out to me to cover this case and to kind of clear up some misconceptions floating around, so let's begin. The night was August 13th, 1995. Louine and Roberta Tapia were getting ready for a night filled with dancing, and it was much needed for them as they were parents to 3 kids under the age of 7. Their children were little Rosie, who was 6 years old, and her 2 4-year-old twin siblings, Robert and Angelica. Louine also had 2 other children, Esmeralda, who was 20, and Amelia, who was 18 from a previous marriage. Whenever mom and dad needed a night out, Amelia would step in and babysit her younger siblings. As a really close family, it was never any issue for her, and they always had a ton of fun together. So that's exactly what happened that Saturday night. Just before dinner, Louine kissed her kids goodbye, and she and her husband took off. At around 2:30 in the morning, the parents finally made it back home, and one of the first things that Louine did was go to check in on her little kids. Louine and her husband, along with the younger kids, lived in the Heartland Apartments in Salt Lake City, Utah. Rosie and her twin siblings all shared a bedroom together, and when Louine checked on them, she saw that they were all sleeping peacefully in their beds. Their bedroom window was open, and that was likely to cool off from the Utah summer heat. Before Louine left the room, she closed the window, but not all the way because she was scared that the noise from shutting the window would wake the kids up. But she closed the curtains all the way, kissed her kids on the forehead, and then left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar like usual. Louine then crawled into bed with her husband and dozed off. But at around 5 in the morning, something woke Louine up. It wasn't anything in particular, but once she was awake, she felt deep down in her gut that something was not right. So that mama bear instinct kicked in, and when she got out of bed to go and check on the kids, she noticed that the door to Rosie and the twins' bedroom was completely shut, and she knew that she did not leave it that way. Little did Louine know that on the other side of that bedroom door, something sinister had just taken place. When she opened the door, she immediately noticed that the window, that same window that she had just closed a couple of hours ago, was wide open. And not only that, but the entire screen was missing. The curtains that were previously shut were partially detached and laying on the floor with the blinds. Louine's eyes glossed over the room, and she saw that the twins were sound asleep in their bed, but little Rosie was nowhere to be found. In a panic, Louine wakes up her husband and Amelia, who had spent the night, to help search for Rosie, but when they couldn't find her, they called the Salt Lake City police. Within 30 minutes, the police would arrive, but the Tapias wasted no time in rallying the neighbors of the apartment complex to start searching for Rosie. Right from the start, it seemed that the police felt that Rosie had just woken up and crawled out of the window by herself and just wandered off. But her family insisted that Rosie would never do that. She was only 6 years old and she had never done that before. Regardless, a massive search was launched involving really anyone that would help. An APB was put out with Rosie's description, but the police heavily focused on Rosie's apartment, and more specifically her bedroom. Upon investigating, authorities found a fingerprint on Rosie's window, and looking even further, they found 2 perfect imprints of a shoe. One was on a towel that was on a dresser in front of the bedroom window, and one was on the curtain that was detached and laying on the floor. And just outside of the bedroom window, laying in the dirt, was the missing screen. Investigators found that the screen had been pried open from the outside using some sort of sharp tool, and it was done with so much force that the frame was bent. But even after examining the broken screen, authorities still figured that Rosie likely just left on her own. But unfortunately, a few hours later, this would be proven wrong. A man named Gustavo was out jogging with his dog near the Jordan River Surplus Canal when he spotted something floating in the water. At first glance, he thought it was a doll, but as he got closer, he realized that what he was looking at was actually the body of a little girl. And when the police arrived, they confirmed the unthinkable. That was the body of little Rosie. She was still wearing the same pajamas that she had on from the night before. The location of the Jordan River Canal is really close in proximity to the Heartland apartments where Rosie lived, with it only being about a block away. It was almost directly behind the apartment complex. Investigators searched the canal for any signs of where Rosie might have entered the water, and they even brought in tracking dogs to assist, but they couldn't find anything. Despite Rosie's window being tampered with, the Salt Lake City police thought that this was an open and shut case, that Rosie had accidentally drowned in the canal and that this was all just some tragic accident. But when the autopsy results came back the following day, one thing was very clear. Rosie had been murdered. The results showed that Rosie had been badly beaten and suffered from blunt force trauma, and she had also been sexually assaulted before she died. But her ultimate cause of death was drowning. What I'm about to say is probably one of the hardest parts to hear. Authorities were able to recover DNA samples from underneath Rosie's fingernails, meaning that she had likely fought her attacker. At 6 years old, she fought for her life. But unfortunately, the canal water did contaminate the DNA, and as a result, it wasn't of high enough quality to be entered into CODIS, which is the United States National DNA Database. Authorities came to the conclusion that whoever took Rosie could very well be someone she knew, and they also believed that whoever this person was took Rosie from her bedroom directly to the canal. Right away, investigators compiled a list of sex offenders in the area, and they even honed in on a few suspicious residents at the apartment complex. Hundreds of people were interviewed, but no concrete evidence was ever found tying anyone to Rosie's murder. Authorities even interviewed the twins that were sleeping in the same bedroom as Rosie that night, and they both said that they didn't hear or see anything. But just when things started to fall flat, an upstairs neighbor at the Heartland apartments came forward and told police that the night Rosie went missing, they heard a scream at around 4 in the morning, and it's likely that Rosie was taken around that time. And then another woman living at the complex came forward and told police something that would turn this investigation upside down. The woman told investigators that just 1 week before Rosie's abduction and murder, her own daughter was kidnapped and raped at that same apartment complex, right out of her own bedroom window, too. But when she went to the employees at the apartment complex, they reportedly told her to keep quiet about it. And if things couldn't get any worse, another woman living at the same apartment complex came forward and told police that her daughter was almost kidnapped the year before. Once news of this spread, everyone living at the Heartland was sent into a panic, rightfully so. As a result, the complex hired an overnight security guard, changed out everyone's window locks, and increased the lighting around the vicinity. As part of the investigation, authorities asked the Tapia family if they knew of anyone who would want to hurt Rosie, and to their surprise, 3 people came to mind. The first person was a family friend named Anthony. Anthony had a son about Rosie's age, and from what I put together, I believe they also lived at the Heartland apartments. Louine woke Anthony up the night Rosie went missing to help search, but he started acting really weird as the night went on. Right before searching the area where Rosie would eventually be found, Anthony reportedly stopped the search party and almost demanded that everyone turn around and head back to the complex, which they all did. He was one of the very few people who knew which bedroom Rosie was sleeping in, and this is really important to note. Rosie and the twins had only been sleeping in that bedroom for about a month. Before that, it was occupied by their older sisters, Esmeralda and Amelia, but they had just moved out right before this incident. Anthony was interviewed, but he and his wife both insist that he was at home the entire night of the abduction and murder. He also had no criminal history prior to this, and from what I can find, he hasn't had one since. And as far as I know, police haven't compared his DNA to what was found, as they state it's too expensive and want to be sure before proceeding. The second person was brought up by Amelia. The evening before Rosie went missing while their parents were out, Rosie wanted to play on the apartment complex's playground after dinner. So at around 7 p.m., Amelia walked her over there and then returned home really quick to check on the twins. But within 15 minutes of being home, there was a knock on the door. When Amelia opened the door, she was surprised to see a strange man holding Rosie. The man told her that Rosie had fallen off the slide and gotten hurt, so Amelia quickly took Rosie from the man and tried to politely end the conversation. But just before she could shut the door, the man said something that made Amelia's stomach turn. He said, "Bye, Rosie." When Amelia asked Rosie, are you okay? What hurts? Rosie said that nothing had happened and she wasn't hurt. Amelia asked Rosie how the man knew her name, but Rosie said she didn't know and that she never told him her name. But what's even scarier is that Rosie mentioned that he wasn't at the playground with any kids, and instead he was just watching the kids play. Amelia described this person as a thin white male wearing a baseball cap and big sunglasses. From Amelia's description, police were able to put together this composite sketch, but this wasn't created until 2010, 15 years after Rosie's murder. The police hadn't even asked her to help create this sketch until this point. And unfortunately, this man, who became known as the Good Samaritan, has never come forward nor been identified. No one remembers seeing him in the area, but my question is, if he was innocent, why hasn't he come forward? The third person that came to the family's mind was a man who was known to hang around the complex's playground. At the time, it was thought that this man was a bit of a creep who didn't have kids, but would just hang out at the playground and play his guitar for the kids. And for a while there, it was thought that the Good Samaritan that brought Rosie home just hours before she was murdered was the playground guy, but it turned out that it wasn't. Police actually found and interviewed the creepy playground guy in, I believe, 2020, and they found that he did in fact have a son that he would bring to the playground. And the night of Rosie's murder, he had an alibi. He was reportedly out on a bike trip and wasn't even at the apartment complex that entire day. And even though the playground guy has been identified, his name has never been made public. From the beginning, people speculated that the Tapia family could have been involved. Rumors spread that the night Rosie went missing, Amelia, who was babysitting, threw a party. People thought that Amelia was keeping secrets and that someone at the party had taken little Rosie, but no evidence of a party was ever found. There was no sign of a gathering, no beer cans, no music, no cars, nothing. There was just that one scream that was heard by a neighbor at around 4 in the morning. But everyone in the Tapia family has always been really cooperative and even gave their fingerprints for comparison, which they all came back as not a match. Another theory that was created by a private investigator working with the family is that Rosie may have not been the intended target. As I mentioned before, Rosie and the twins had only been sleeping in that bedroom for a month, and very few people knew about that. Before, the room was occupied by Esmeralda and Amelia. The PI found that Amelia at the time may have had ties with the 21st Street gang. Some members of the gang and even the rival gang lived in the area and even at that same apartment complex. He speculated that it was possible whoever broke into that bedroom window that night was looking for Amelia, but found Rosie and took her instead. But I want to emphasize that this is only a theory and nothing about this has been proven. With little leads to go on, Rosie's case soon fell ice cold. But in 2012, another murder took place that would leave many people questioning, could this be a connection? On June 26, 2012, 6-year-old Sierra Newbold was kidnapped from her bedroom in the middle of the night in West Jordan, Utah. Unfortunately, a short while later, her body was also found in the Jordan River Canal. She had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and then drowned. Terry Black was eventually arrested and charged with her murder, and although Terry lived in the same neighborhood as Sierra, it's only about 20 minutes away from where Rosie lived in 1995. The details in these two cases are eerily similar, and the police reportedly did investigate Terry as a possible person of interest in Rosie's case, but they ultimately ruled him out because his wife told them that they didn't live in Utah at the time of Rosie's murder. So they kind of just took their word for it. But the PI working on Rosie's case found that this was not true. Terry had a criminal record in 4 different states, and at the time of Rosie's murder, he was living in Utah. Louine was shown a photo of Terry and said that he does look familiar and his name also sounds familiar, but sadly nothing has come of this. Terry has never been charged in Rosie's murder, and from what I can find, authorities have not compared his DNA to what was found at Rosie's crime scene. Rosie's case went cold once again. That is until 2015. This is when Rosie's brother Robert, who was now in his 20s, told authorities that he actually did see a man that he didn't know in their bedroom that night. Robert said the man had a beard and told him to go back to sleep. But since this memory happened so many years after the murder, I'm not entirely sure if authorities took this seriously. Fast forward to 2017. Authorities announced that they discovered new leads involving 2 men and 2 women. The Salt Lake City police stated that one of the men is considered a person of interest, while the others may hold valuable information as witnesses. However, the police have not shared much more than that. They are keeping the names hidden from the public, and although we don't know who these people are, it's speculated that one of the men may be the Good Samaritan. But perhaps the biggest break in this case came in 2019 when, out of nowhere, a new composite sketch of a possible person of interest was released to the public. This sketch was created based off of a direct neighbor of Rosie that was completely overlooked in 1995. Back in 1995, this neighbor, who prefers to be unidentified, tried telling police that the morning Rosie went missing, he saw a teenager walking from the same direction of the canal. He was able to see this because of a white pickup truck that had been parked on the dirt road between the complex and the canal. The truck was doing a U-turn, and its headlights flashed on the teenager. At first glance, he thought the teenager was wearing pants with 2 different colors, but he quickly realized that his pants were wet from the knees down. The neighbor reportedly tried telling police this once Rosie was found, but according to him, they almost refused to talk to him and just wouldn't listen. He was able to sit down with authorities 3 years after Rosie's murder, and he described the person he saw as a 16 to 17-year-old Hispanic male with a slight build, narrow face, and high cheekbones. He was wearing denim jeans, a white shirt, and a medium-length gold chain necklace. The detective he spoke to put together a photo lineup of males in their late 30s, which is obviously not what the teen looked like. The neighbor recalled feeling like the police were just not listening to him. So when the correct sketch was finally created in 2019, the Tapia family and the neighbor hoped that something would come of it, and it did. It was discovered that in 1995, Danny Woodland, who was the boyfriend of Rosie's older sister Esmeralda, would often sneak in that same bedroom window that Rosie was abducted from. It's important to note that almost every article and video about this case states that Danny was Amelia's boyfriend, but the Tapia family confirmed to me that he was actually seeing Esmeralda. As a result of this composite sketch being released, Danny came forward and stated that he was shocked that the police never tried to interview him because back in 1995, he admitted to sneaking in that same bedroom window to try and see Esmeralda. But at the time, as we know, Esmeralda was not living in the house. Danny stated that right before the composite sketch was fully released to the public, he got a call from one of his old friends that he used to hang out with at the time of Rosie's murder. The friend joked, quote, "Wouldn't it be funny if it looked like one of us?" End quote. Danny mentioned that this friend would often drop him off at the Tapia house and would watch him go in through that bedroom window. When the composite sketch was fully released that May, Danny instantly realized that it really looked like this friend. So he texted this friend and said, "That looks like you." And the friend called him back immediately and said, quote, "No, that ain't me. It looks like you. It looks like you more than it does me." End quote. According to Danny, he tried to get this friend to talk to the police, but I'm honestly not sure if anything has ever come of this. I read that Danny offered for his DNA to be compared, but that was in late 2019, and there hasn't been another update about this that I can find since. What's interesting though is that as a result of the composite sketch being released, in 2019, the PI working with the Tapia family put together a photo lineup with a bunch of high school photos of Danny and his friend group. He brought in the neighbor who witnessed the teen that night, and he immediately picked out Danny's friend. Danny and his friend both deny having anything to do with Rosie's murder, but as we know, Rosie's case is still unsolved, so anything is possible. Another factor that comes into play involves a Barbie doll that was found on Rosie's grave just a few days after she was buried. Louine thought that it was odd, so she picked it up along with a few other things, and ever since has kept it in a glass case as part of a memorial for Rosie. It's in pristine condition, and the family, as well as the Utah Cold Case Coalition, who has been working very closely on this case, would like it to be sent in for testing and compared to the DNA found under Rosie's fingernails. But like a lot of loose ends in this case, nothing has come of this either. Police believe that whoever did this was someone close to the Tapia family, and it's been speculated by them that Amelia may have had something more to do with Rosie's murder than she let on. Again, this has never been confirmed. And sadly, in 2020, Amelia passed away due to a medical condition. According to the family, Amelia lived with a lot of guilt over what happened to Rosie that night and felt that if she had just slept in the same room as her, or possibly left a light on that night, that she would still be here today. Unfortunately, Rosie's murder is still unsolved 27 years later. Every year, her family marks the sad anniversary by visiting her grave and letting her know that she is not forgotten and that one day, justice will prevail. No piece of information is too small. If you have any information regarding the murder of Rosie Tapia, please call the tip line monitored by your family at 385-258-3313. You can also visit the website whokilledrosie.com, which was created by her family to read up on this case and to show your support. Her family deserves answers. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you have a case that you'd like me to cover, feel free to leave it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time. But until then, stay safe.